Alright, this is going to be my video about Marvel television projects and their place in continuity and how some of them, at least to some extent, could still be canon to the MCU in the future. Um, so this will contain some spoilers for MCU projects. I'm going to try and keep them as small as possible, not to ruin your viewing experience, but it kind of helps to get into those details so that you understand where I'm coming from. And again, these are my own personal opinions. Officially, as of right now, November 2025, these are not considered canon by Marvel Studios. Um, and there will be continuity errors with the Marvel Studios projects. I stated this in the other video I did. At a certain point, Marvel Studios started keeping information secret from Marvel Television just because they didn't want any leaks, and they really didn't consider anything Marvel Television was doing as canon to their stuff, so they really didn't care um, if Marvel Television kept up with them or not. Um, so the reason why I'm doing this is because at one point, um, Marvel Studios didn't consider anything from Marvel Television as canon, like especially when they got into using Disney Plus. Um, and eventually, when Marvel Studios took over Marvel Television and shut them down, Marvel Studios, Kevin Feige, I believe, said in an interview that the Marvel Studios shows on Disney Plus would be the first time the movies and TV shows interconnected, thus meaning the Marvel television projects were not canon. However, eventually when um, Marvel Studios was working on Daredevil Born Again, there were some set leaks that kind of got Marvel television fans upset because they were kind of the first time Marvel Studios was openly within the story of the MCU saying the Marvel television projects were non-canon. Before they kind of just ignored them, but now when they were getting more tied in with Marvel Studios taking over Daredevil using some of the same actors and stuff, it kind of seemed like Marvel Studios was canonizing them, but then when this leak happened, it was kind of evidence that they weren't canon. They were just using same actors from Marvel Television to play the same characters, but these would be like the Marvel Studios version of the characters. But um, there was a leak from Daredevil Born Again that pretty much angered a bunch of fans and caused Marvel Studios to rethink continuity of the shows. And it was because of that leak that they had to backtrack on saying that the shows weren't canon, and they canonized Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, the Defenders, and the Punisher. And they did that through a trailer for the Echo TV series. So it was like if you wanted to catch up with what they're doing in Echo, you had to go back, watch those shows to understand, well, in that instance, where Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, came from. And like I said, because they were considered non-canon, there actually is a continuity error um, with uh, the Echo TV series and the Daredevil TV series. It's kind of a minor one. I believe also Born Again has a continuity error with Jessica Jones. But again, that was because Echo and Born Again were being made, initially at least. Born Again was kind of reworked um, with the idea that those shows weren't in continuity, so there really weren't continuity errors. Um, so like some specific stuff, even though it's kind of minor and you might forget about them. Um, like in Echo, uh, the Kingpin shows Echo the hammer he killed his father with. But if you watch Daredevil, they actually use two different hammers. In Daredevil, there's a claw hammer that he uses. In Echo, he shows her a ball peen hammer. I know it's minor, but it's kind of one of those things that sticks out. Um, and then Born Again, I believe there's a continuity error with I forget her name, the female white tiger. Um, I believe in like the first season of Jessica Jones, Jessica mentions she's friend. I think it's Angela Del Toro, I believe. She mentions being friends with Angela Del Toro, but then if you go to Born Again, uh, Angela's like a young little girl, so there's kind of a weird continuity where she might not have even been born, or she would have been a little girl when Jessica references her as being a friend. But then again, as I said, initially Jessica Jones was not in continuity with Daredevil Born Again, and then they redid it and they're kind of just going with whatever. Um, so I want to address Inhumans. I kind of did this in my other video. Um, I put Inhumans because it was such a failure of a show. Um, so if you watch it, it is kind of meant to tie into Agents of Shield and then the MCU movies. But again, it was such a failure that Marvel Television just wanted to drop it, and again, Marvel Studios didn't want to acknowledge anything, so it wasn't going to be acknowledged. So, in my own personal placement, I would put Inhumans as part of Earth 838, and that's so that it connects to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Um, if you've watched the movie, if you watch the show, I believe his name's Anson Mount played Black Bolt in the Inhumans TV series, and then Marvel Studios brought him back to play Black Bolt that appears in Earth 838 that Doctor Strange visits with America in the movie. So my thinking is, you could use this Inhumans TV show, remove it from the MCU timeline, and just consider it as a prequel to Multiverse of Madness. That's just my thinking, and the way to clean that up with MCU timelines and it being ignored so that you actually have a payoff for watching that show in a future project. You can be like, oh, that's the Black Bolt. It's not a new Black Bolt you're seeing for the first time. You can have the experience of, oh, this is his origin story, and now you get to see him in Multiverse of Madness. And again, just to reiterate, to make it clear, this is just my own personal explanation of how it would work and not the official story by Marvel Studios or Marvel Television. Agent Carter. So I did go over this before. Marvel Television made a TV series for Agent Carter. Marvel Studios made a one shot for Agent Carter, and they're kind of supposed to be in continuity with each other. Although like I've said in the other video, I've watched the one shot over and over. I've watched the TV series over and over, and it kind of it kind of doesn't make sense. Like the stories just don't line up. So it's almost like it's an either one or the other kind of situation, at least for me. If you're not a stickler for continuity, then I guess it won't be that big of a problem. But I say the TV show's better because obviously it ran for 2 seasons versus a one shot that was just a few minutes long. And the TV show actually introduces James Darcy playing Edwin Jarvis, um, Howard Stark's like butler. Um, and he eventually comes back and makes a cameo as Edwin Jarvis in Avengers Endgame. So to me, it's worth watching the TV show because you get that payoff later on in Endgame. Um, and this is why I say it's still possible this show could be canonized, is because James Darcy is set to return as Jarvis, the AI, as far as we know, not Edwin Jarvis and Vision Quest. Um, so it's kind of interesting. You know, that he's not coming back as Edwin Jarvis, but Jarvis, because the whole thing of Jarvis the AI was voiced by Paul Bettany, who now plays Vision. And so for Vision Quest, you already have Paul Bettany there. So why would you necessarily go back to get James Darcy to play Jarvis when, James Darcy never played the AI, he only played the human version, so it kind of seems to indicate that there's some kind of connection there that they want to make even bigger because even his cameo in Endgame might be forgettable to people, so it's kind of interesting. And then they did have James Darcy voice Edwin Jarvis in an episode of What If, and that was the What If Agatha Harkness went to Hollywood, which is also an episode that references Howard Stark having a movie studio, which he, as far as I know, never did um, in the history of Marvel, aside from the Agent Carter TV series in season 2. So it seems like Marvel Studios really likes referencing the Agent Carter TV series. So there's got to be, in my opinion, there's got to be something there because it just constantly gets referenced. Um, so that's why I say Agent Carter could it be open to being considered canon because we still haven't seen Vision Quest, so the possibility is still open. Plus, the Agent Carter TV show takes place in the 1940s after World War II. So there really isn't any other project as of right now that contradicts any events happening in the 40s. So that's why it can kind of get away with still being in continuity too. Now the Darkhold shows. I kind of group all these together because of their connection to each other and the use of the Darkhold. So I consider the Darkhold shows Agents of Shield, Agents of Shield, Slingshot, Runaways, Cloak and Dagger. Um, my reasoning is this: originally, the Darkhold debuted in live action on the Marvel television side of things in Agents of Shield. And when it was on there, they never really acknowledged that there were multiple Darkholds. Like that was the Darkhold. That was it. They never exactly. They never said there was more than one, but they also never said there was exactly one. So they just dealt with that specific book, so it kind of left it vague of if are there more because in the comics there were more than one. So it kind of left the door open to there being more than one. Um and then yeah, eventually you get into WandaVision and that introduced a Darkhold on the Marvel Studios side. Um Again, if you just watch the project like WandaVision, again they dealt with it similar to how Marvel Television dealt with it, where they basically dealt with just that one book. They never acknowledged there were multiple Darkholds, but at the same time, they kind of never just said it was the one and only Darkhold. I know there were some interviews done um, around WandaVision asking like the cast and crew about the Darkhold and if it was the same one from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and some of the people said that uh, it was, and then just I don't know, Agatha used magic on it so it looks different or something like that. Um, but then you also had like Kevin Feige and Brad Winderbaum, the head of Marvel TV shows at the time, um, saying that the Marvel television projects were not considered canon. So You have that contradiction of the WandaVision crew saying it's the same as the Marvel television, where you have the other higher ups at Marvel Studios saying that it isn't the same because the Agents of Shield is not canon, so it can't be the same because they exist in two different realities. Um, but eventually, on the Marvel Studios side, in Agatha All Along, they finally acknowledged that there are multiple Darkholds. So that's kind of interesting that it now opens up the door that they could coexist in the same universe. Um, because before it was like this is the Darkhold or this is the Darkhold. We don't know if there's any more. We don't know if this is the only one. But now it's like no, there were multiple that existed um, in the MCU. And I also personally, if you watch Agatha all along, when they establish that there are multiple Darkholds, to me it was kind of out of place because I feel like there was no reason really for that scene to be included. Like acknowledging that there were other Darkholds that were destroyed really doesn't add that much to the story of Agatha all along. So it kind of feels like it was put in there on purpose to help expand the universe in a way, so that you had the knowledge that other people potentially had other Darkholds and were using them. So it was just kind of felt out of place. So that's why I think it's a very interesting scene that kind of can't be ignored. Um, then Hellstrom. So Hellstrom kind of is a Darkhold show also, but it's in such a minor way that I it can kind of be ignored. So the reference only works if you know a lot about the behind the scenes stuff of Marvel television, which is why it's kind of weird to include. In the first episode of the series, the Hellstrom kids ask the caretaker where he's been because he's been gone and out of touch. And he says that he was busy with something in Texas. Now, that is, if you watch the entire thing of Hellstrom on its own, that will be just a throwaway line that you're like, okay, he was just doing something somewhere. If you have the background knowledge of Marvel Television, you would know that they were actually making Hellstrom as part of this Adventure into Fear kind of set of shows for Hulu that would be very horror driven and potentially set up like a Midnight Suns project. And one of the other shows that was in development same time as Hellstrom was a Ghost Rider TV series that was a spin-off from Agents of Shield. Um, but Hellstrom was being made before the Ghost Rider series was being made. And on the very first day, when Ghost Rider was going to start shooting, it was around that, well, before that, Marvel Studios took over Marvel Television. First day of shooting, Marvel Studios contacted the cast and crew and said the show was canceled. So they completely shut down the Ghost Rider series and they shut down the whole Adventure into Fear uh, set of shows. But they allowed Hellstrom to be made because they already invested the money into the show. So they wanted to finish the show and, air it at as much money and viewership they could off of what they had. But, and this is a good example of where, if you look back, there's like very little Marvel branding on Hellstrom when it was released. Like Marvel Studios wanted to bury that it was a Marvel TV show. Um, but the whole reason I'm talking about Ghost Rider is um, that show was supposed to be set on the border of Texas and Mexico. And I believe somewhere I read that Ghost Rider was actually supposed to air before Hellstrom. And so we would have probably, I don't think it was ever officially confirmed, but just lining up that what was said in episode 1 of Hellstrom, we would have seen the caretaker in the Ghost Rider series, and then he would have been the connective tissue, the connective character, almost like a Nick Fury figure, connecting the shows all together before the bigger crossover. Um, so that's kind of why I include Hellstrom on this, even though the connection is just so small, and even the showrunner at one point said, well, they were asked how many references there would be in the show connecting it to the larger universe. And the showrunner basically said there wouldn't be any, if anything, they were just going to reference the comics. So it really was a thing for Hellstrom that was supposed to be an MCU show by Marvel Television that was supposed to be connected, and they just dropped all connections, especially when Marvel Studios took over. They just wanted to bury the show, but there is that Texas line, and then if you want to get into the comic book side, the caretaker is actually originally from Ghost Rider comics, so he is technically a Ghost Rider character in the Hellstrom show. But that's why I kind of leave this off on its own, is because ultimately there is no payoff for the show as of right now, but I highly doubt it, that there will be in the future. Um, yeah, and that's basically the end. Like I said, these could be connected in the future. Um, I guess the other thing that I should have pointed out is like on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and I believe the Runaways, the later seasons of those actually took place during like the events of Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, where the snap happens and people get blinked out of existence. Um, and that stuff is never addressed on the shows. You would think they would feel the impact of that, and that was around the time um, that Marvel Studios was keeping stuff secret from Marvel Television. So you run into that continuity error of where they just never address it. So unless you just consider them as they've already addressed it, maybe like off screen, like they understand there's people missing and stuff, but they have to move on and focus on what they're doing. If you think about it like that, it could work. Um, but yeah, that's kind of one of those examples of a real world issue and company conflict that kind of impacts continuity within the actual stories. And that's the other thing I wanted to talk about is like we have Avengers Secret Wars coming out that Kevin Feige is pretty much called a reset, but it's pretty much a reboot of the MCU. So in my thinking is you could canonize these now, because before, when you were in the main timeline, um you'd run into a lot of continuity errors, or a lot more, because you have different storytellers trying to tell the same story in the same continuity. But now you shut down Marvel Television, so you kind of eliminated another storyteller, and you can rework things kind of like they did with the Defenders. And then you're rebooting the universe anyway, so now you could include them in that because you're getting rid of the entire universe. You're getting rid of the Marvel Studio stuff, so you could add the Marvel Television stuff and make the Marvel Television fans happy, but then you're also just taking it away with the reboot. But I'm just saying, like, there's going to be less conflict when everything's rebooted and in a singular timeline after Secret Wars. Um, so I think that's kind of what leaves the door open to these projects getting canonized. Um, and I think that's pretty much it. Again, these are all, as of November 2025, my own personal um, thoughts on the Marvel television projects and how they could potentially make sense in continuity if Marvel television um, projects were to be reconsidered by Marvel Studios, like before the reboot happens. Otherwise, it'd kind of be nice if they were set off on their own Marvel television universe that maybe in Avengers Doomsday or Avengers Secret Wars they could actually be acknowledged as their very own universe. Have them pop up on Battle World and explain how the Marvel television universe is an like a sister universe to the MCU or something like that. It'd be nice to tie them in at least some way if they're not directly connected, just to pay tribute to all their hard work and all that. When you're getting into all that multiverse stuff, it's kind of the appropriate time to actually pull stuff like that, and you can pull it off because you have the explanation there. But yeah, that's it. Like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.